Welcome back everyone. As most of you know, the iPad 9th generation and the iPad mini 6 have both came out, so let's go and see how they both compare, and considering the fact that you can pick them up both brand new from Apple, this is going to be pretty interesting. Now the iPad 9th generation, but first of all, you can pick both of these things up in the description below. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now definitely the iPad 9th generation is the cheaper iPad between these two, and in some ways it is a better value per dollar because you are getting a really good iPad for a cheaper price tag at $329. Now the iPad mini is a little bit more expensive, but it's not a horribly priced device either. $499 is not a bad price to pay for an iPad mini 6, and there is a little bit of difference in the internals, but on the outside, obviously you are getting a much bigger iPad on that 10.2 inch iPad. That is a 10.2 inch, obviously, Retina IPS panel, and the iPad mini 6 has that 8.3 inch liquid Retina IPS panel. So between both, I do think that the iPad mini 6 has a better looking display, although the iPad 9th generation has a pretty big advantage of having True Tone, which the mini 6 also has, but that is a big difference from its predecessor, but you're also getting a higher resolution display, which is pretty funny as well. You have the same type of brightness at 500 nits on both as well, so that's another big thing, but definitely do keep in mind that the 9th gen iPad, although it doesn't look ugly, it is a bit more dated of a design than the iPad mini 6, mostly because, you don't have a home button on the front. Now you still have Touch ID on both, which is awesome, but you do have, just a better looking iPad and a newer looking iPad on the mini 6 than on the iPad, 9th generation. Now on the bottom, there's also a pretty big difference. You have a Lightning port on the iPad 9, where you actually have a USB Type-C port on the iPad mini 6. So you have, a lot more, future ability on the iPad mini 6 than the iPad 9th generation for sure. And on the back, you have aluminum backs on both, but one doesn't feel way more premium than the other one. Because the iPad mini 6 is more expensive, it doesn't feel like it's a more expensive device. Now it does have flat sides, which definitely looks better and feels better, but both of them still feel pretty premium, so I don't really have too many complaints there. Now you do have a camera setup on the back of both of them, and I'll go ahead and hit on both of them right now because this is very, very interesting. Now on the iPad 9th generation, you have a single 8 megapixel camera. It's a standard lens, there's nothing crazy with it. You can do 1080p at 30 frames per second, and it's a very average camera. This thing is equivalent to about an iPhone 6 camera. So Apple has made very little improvements to the back camera of the iPad 9th generation. On the iPad mini 6 though, they made a humongous improvement from its predecessor. This thing has a single 12 megapixel wide-angle lens, and this camera can do 4K at up to 60 frames per second. And that is an amazing resolution to use on an iPad like this. It's in a smaller footprint than, the iPad Pros that, originally had 4K at 60 and all that good stuff. But this one has a really solid camera on the back, and I am a humongous fan of it. So when it comes down to the back cameras of both of these, it's definitely going for the iPad mini 6, and it definitely is worth the extra money. However, on the front camera, this is where things get a little interesting. They have pretty much the same exact camera setup on both of these iPads. So they're both 12 megapixel lenses, and they both can do 1080p at 60. The big thing though is that they're both ultra-wide sensors. So what does this mean? Well, essentially just like on iPhones we have an ultra-wide sensor, we can essentially get more in a photo. It zooms out of a photo technically more than your standard wide-angle lens. But on top of that, both of these iPads support that center stage functionality, which essentially is if you're on video calls with certain apps, I know it works for FaceTime, it'll go ahead and track you wherever you are. So if you're moving throughout, it'll actually track you there with your face. And that is an awesome little feature. I love that a lot. And I think that's, hopefully that comes on the iPhone sooner than later. But that's a really cool feature for sure. So when it comes down to both of these, the iPad mini 6 definitely has a far better camera, but I am glad that the iPad 9th generation also has that ultra-wide camera on the front too. So in terms of cameras, that covers it up there. Now in terms of longevity, this is a pretty different factor between these two because hardware-wise, the iPad mini 6 definitely wins. You have the USB Type-C port, you have a better feeling device, kind of, not really, but you have a newer designed iPad on there, which is definitely going to outlast the hardware of the iPad 9. But on top of that, with software, the iPad mini 6 is going to beat it too. You have a newer chipset by 2 generations. The iPad 9 had that A13 chip, the iPad mini 6 has that A15 chip. So you're definitely getting at least maybe 2 versions of software more. On the mini 6, in my opinion, it's probably going to be more. It's going to be a couple years till we see another iPad mini, where the iPad 9 is probably going to, get a, new one next year. So when it comes down to the longevity, I definitely say the iPad mini 6 is going to be the winner here. But the iPad 9 is still going to be supported for a while too. It has the same chipset as the iPhone 11, so it's definitely here to stay. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, but the iPad 9 is probably not going to last as long as the mini 6. So in terms of that covers it up there. Now let's go and hit on the performance between both of these iPads. Now the iPad mini 6, like I mentioned, has that Apple A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 4GB of RAM, where the iPad 9th generation has that Apple A13 Bionic chip inside of it with 3GB of RAM. So the main RAM difference is that you're getting a gig less of RAM on the iPad 9th generation than on the iPad mini 6. Is that a crazy big deal? It totally depends up to you. If you're doing a lot of multitasking or split screen multitasking, you'll be able to get better performance technically on something like an iPad mini 6 than on an iPad 9. But on top of that, with that newer A15 chipset, you are getting, a really good performing iPad on the Mini 6. It's, perfect. It is one of the faster iPads out there behind those M1 iPad Pros. And this is a very solid iPad. I liked it a lot when it first came out. A couple weeks in, it's still very good, and I have very few complaints about it. But I'm going to be honest, the iPad 9th generation is a very good performing iPad, and I kind of forgot how good these iPads are, with the iPad 8th generation even too. That was a very good performing iPad. And it seems like every year Apple kind of makes a better value per dollar, for these iPads. The iPad 9th generation at that same price tag is giving you better performance, from the predecessor. And there's not that much to complain about here, because you already know what you're getting into. If I wasn't comparing the Mini 6 to the, 9th gen, I probably wouldn't tell that crazy big of a difference. You're definitely getting a better experience on the Mini 6. But because iPadOS is running on both of these, the performance and everything kind of feels the same. I don't feel like either one of these are choppy. Maybe the Mini 6 is the better feeling one. It's definitely the fact that the iPad Mini 6 is the faster one for sure, but I still think the iPad 9th generation is a very good performing iPad. And if I were to rate the iPad Mini 6, out of 10, and let's say that's a 10 out of 10, the iPad 9th generation is easily maybe an 8.9 out of 10. There's not that much to complain about. It does have an extra gig of RAM, which is pretty much its biggest downfall, but the performance and the speed and everything is still very good on that iPad as well. So very few complaints for me on that specific end. Now finally, ending it off with the battery life, this is where the iPad 9th generation just washes the competition. So on the iPad mini 6, you had a 19.3 watt hour battery. The iPad 9th generation has a 32.4 watt hour battery. That is a massive size battery to have on this specific, tablet. And I'm going to be honest, if you have an iPad 9th generation, you are going to be getting better battery life for sure than from an iPad mini 6. Even though you're getting a bigger display and higher resolution and all that stuff, you're still getting a better experience of battery life, in my opinion, on that iPad 9 than on the iPad mini 6. And to be honest, they are both pretty good. I haven't charged either one of these. I bought these 3 weeks ago, and maybe I charged them one time, but they've been performing extremely well in terms of battery life. But the iPad 9th generation is definitely the winner here. So in terms of that covers it up there. And to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you buy an iPad mini 6 or should you buy an iPad 9th generation? Well, this is what I'll tell you. The iPad mini 6 is probably the better iPad I would recommend. It has more of a future in front of it, has a lot of capability. It's a very fast tablet, has so much going for it. And I would probably say, if you have all the money in the world, picking up that iPad is probably the better way to go, in my opinion. But if you're on a budget and let's say you want to just buy the best iPad that you can for the money and, better value per dollar is what you're looking for, that iPad 9th generation is a very, very solid iPad. I'm a humongous fan of it, and I think it has so much capability for that dollar, standpoint. And I think that's awesome. When you get an iPad like this, you can pretty much guarantee that you're set for a couple more years. And once Apple makes that next, iPhone, that iPad 10th gen or whatever, hopefully they remove that bezel, but this is a very good performing iPad on both. And I think the Mini 6 is better, but the iPad 9th gen is still very good as well. So that pretty much covers it up here. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.